Hello viewers, let us discuss today the idea of financial administration in ancient India. Now it is well known that the ancient Indian state was based on the twin principles of dharma and danda. The ancient state was a state based on morality and ethics. But does it imply that the concept of financial administration, public governance, revenue policy was absent in ancient India? Or does it imply the dharma state was a state without giving any emphasis on taxation and revenue? Students, public finance was an important and an indispensable part of ancient India. The ancient Indian state was a state which focused both on dharma as well as on artha. The concept of dharma and artha provided the premise for good governance. In this module, we'll try to understand the various aspects of public finance as encapsulated in the texts of Mahabharata, Manusmriti and Arthashastra. Now, what was public finance and how did it originate in ancient India? Taxation and financial administration comprise one of the most significant and pivotal aspects of any system of governance. The basic structure of taxes ultimately provide for revenue collection for the state machinery and is the basis for functioning of a proper state. The plans for societal development and the overall progress for the state and society would depend on a balanced and healthy policy of taxation. Ancient Indian political thinking has always considered the issue of public finance to be of primary importance, and that is the reason why emphasis was placed on artha, which comprised of both revenue as well as treasury. In fact, artha was so important that it was an indispensable part of the saptang, the 7 elements of the state. Artha or treasury was considered to be vital for a well-functioning welfare state. In fact, all the texts that we'll study on focused on the primary importance of kosha and arth. We not only need a proper financial system, but also we need a system to ensure that finances well balanced the state and ensure that there was zero corruption in the governmental machinery. This is the reason why Manusmriti, Mahabharata, Arthashastra and Shukra Nitisar provided detailed description of the ways and means of creating an abundant treasury, that is the kosha, which is the inseparable part of the 7 organs of the state, that is the saptang. These treatises discuss the methods of revenue collection, which we shall study shortly, along with describing the modes of taxation with specifications for levying normal and additional taxes in different conditions and for different categories of citizenry. So just like the way there is a system of direct and indirect taxation policy in India, we also find such a system prevalent in ancient India. In the earliest period of Indian history, that is the early Vedic period, the state probably dependent for its support on the voluntary contribution of the people. So there were no system of compulsory payment of taxes. Initially, at the evolutionary stage of the Vedic civilization, the system of treasury was based on voluntary contribution from the people. But some method of compulsory contribution must have been found necessary in India as soon as a more improved form of government had come into existence. With the establishment of a proper systematic Raj-dharma system, the system of treasury, kosh, became indispensable. The early tax system, however, was extremely simple, and the evolution of a complex system of public finance was undoubtedly a slow and an evolutionary process. However, by the 4th century BC, a system of public finance had reached a very advanced stage of development, as is evident in Arthashastra of Kautilya and the Brahminical as well as the Buddhist texts. Recognizing the extraordinary significance of finance in the political administration of the state, it was stated that all undertakings, all initiatives and all enterprises were dependent on money, finance and treasury, and therefore the king should look at the treasury first. It was underlined that when the receipts and expenditure are properly cared for, the king will never find himself in financial and military difficulties. In all the different texts that we shall shortly study, we find a very, very well planned and a strategic way of taxation and public finance. And it was created in such a way that there was state welfare, there was separate provision for construction and development projects, as well as the normal functioning of the state. Now, what is the significance of financial administration in a state based on dharma and ethics? The promotion of earth was to be procured by encouraging trade, industry and agriculture, by developing natural resources, by bringing fresh land under cultivation, by building dams and canals to make agriculture independent of rain, and by encouraging extensive and systematic working of mines. Please note, all these activities are based on a very sound and strong financial system, and hence earth was supposed to be of primary importance and significance in a well-established state. Now, what were the sources of public finance? The different texts focus on 6 sources of public finance. They are war booty, boli, bhag, sita, kara and shulko. Let us go a little deeper into each of these sources. We start first with the war booty. What is war booty? Whenever a country made a successful conquest, it not only brought a territorial annexation, but it also brought with the conquest a certain amount of treasury of the conquered territory. So victories were always followed not just by political gains, but also by financial gains. Gains of victory in the form of wealth of the losing nation comprise the primary source of public finance. Salvatore claims that there are specific terms used and references made to the explanations provided by various scholars that the share of the booty taken by the king after winning a war was one of the main sources of revenue. The second important source of public finance was boli. This term has occurred very frequently in the Rig Veda. This term primarily means an oblation, a gift or offering which is usually connected with religious sacrifices. According to ancient Indian scholar V.S. Apte, it is the offering of a portion of a daily meal, which can be rice, grain, ghee, to all creatures, one of the 5 daily yajnas to be performed by a householder. It is usually performed by throwing up into the air near the house door a portion of a daily meal before partaking of it. Kalidas uses it as a tribute to the king, which was procured by the king for the welfare, happiness and prosperity of the subjects. U.N. Ghoshal interprets boli as the exclusive designation of the Indo-Aryan king's receipt from his subjects, as well as from the conquered king. It is possible that boli was the first customary contribution payable by the subjects that did not solely depend upon free choice. However, another ancient Indian scholar, Salvatore, does not agree with this explanation. He says that there are various references from the different texts, and quoting the Manusmriti, he concludes that bali was first taken as a religious offering and then as a tax on religious performances, as proved by Manu, Panini and Kautilya. It was essential in the sense that it was not just an offering to the gods in the form of an oblation or one of the 5 yajnas, but also a tax on some kind of religious sacrifices that Kautilya uses the term bali in the Arthashastra. where he mentions that Bali was one of the chief sources of revenue in his kingdom. The next source of public finance is Bhag. Bhag is considered to be an octroi duty or land tax by some ancient Indian scholars. But some of them believe that it was a share or portion of the produce payable to the state. Another source of public finance was Sita, which was payable to the government lands. This was a produce payable to government lands. The next important source, and it was a very significant source of public finance, which was Kara. It implies that it is some form of state revenue. However, please note, students, that the term Kara does not figure in Vedic literature. Kara denotes a general tax of land as well as a tax on movable property. Differentiating between the terms Bali and Kara, Bali stands for voluntary offering, religious or otherwise. The term Bhag shows that the king was entitled to the share, and the term Kara shows that he collected taxes from the people. At all times, the basic tax was that on land, which was usually called a bhag or a share. So, a portion of the produce of the land was collected by the king as revenue. This was a fixed portion of the crop produce. Shulka was another important source of public finance, which was a toll tax, a custom duty which was levied on ferries, passes and roads. So, it was a toll tax just like the one we have today on highways. The tax system of ancient India was reasonable, rational, but definitely not heavy. It was also convenient, elastic, and appealing. There was no concept of shirking or avoiding taxes. Public finance was a systematic way of governance, and there were certain principles of taxation. K.P. Jaiswal, in his work Hindu Polity, points out certain important principles of taxation which was followed in ancient India. After we study these principles, we will find that these principles appear to be highly modern and contemporary and definitely not outdated. Some of these principles were the greediness of the state not to destroy it and others. So, the system of taxation should be such that the state does not become too greedy to impose heavy taxes on people. Second, overtaxation was definitely never allowed. Extravagant state was opposed. Moderate taxation was appreciated. Taxation should not become a burden. The process of increase in tax should be mild. Taxes should be levied in proper places, in proper time and in proper form. Taxation should never be painful. Taxes should be levied after determining all the inputs as well as outputs. All the important physical, economic and human factors should be taken into account while levying taxes. Imports harmful to the state and fruitless luxuries are to be discouraged by heavy taxation. Beneficial imports should be free from import duties. Economic considerations are everywhere prominent. Productive powers are not to be hampered by heavy taxation. Innovative industries are to be encouraged. Taxes, finally, should be gradual with reference to capacity and should never be in an obnoxious form. All these principles emphasize the fact that taxation should not be a burden on the citizenry. The purpose of taxation was not just to increase revenue but also to promote facilities for better development and societal reconstruction. Let us now study a few texts where taxation has been specifically dealt with. We will start first with the Manusmriti. Chapter 7 of the Manusmriti deals with the methods and principles of taxation comprehensively. Manu talks extensively about state finances. According to Manu, the system of taxation should be such that it enhances the wealth of the state. He also empowered the king the right to collect taxes by providing protection to the people. Thus, taxation in the Manusmriti was also linked to the wage theory. Workers, laborers, professionals were under an obligation to pay taxes to the state regularly. He also mentioned it very clearly that the tax must be collected both from land as well as cattle, and there was a proportion fixed. For example, the percentage of tax on land and cattle was not to be less than 25% and 20% respectively. Manu, however, advised the king that taxes should be levied keeping in mind the capacity of the subjects as well as the occupation. According to him, the king is entitled to 1/50th of gold, 1/6th of crop and 1/12th of commerce. He also stated that if the subjects are overburdened with tax payments, it would lead to great amount of frustration and discontentment among the public and would eventually lead to national calamities. What is very significant to note here is that Manu specified the amount of taxes to be collected and well as the type of taxes to be collected. Manu also advised the king that the entire amount collected through taxes must be used for welfare activities like helping in agriculture, promoting trade, industry, etc. Finance was important even in that era, and Manu coterminously focused both on Raj Dharma as well as emphasis on Kosh and Artha, because a king cannot function without adequate funds in his treasury. Manusmriti also laid down certain principles of financial administration. He elaborated certain sources of state revenue. The principal source of state revenue was taxation. Taxes were levied on the produce of land, cattle, trees, meat, honey, clarified butter, perfumes, medicinal herbs, substances used for flavoring food, roots, fruits, leaves, potherbs, grass, objects made of cane or earthen vessels, and all articles made of stone. So there was a tax imposed on every product. Another source of tax was tolls. The tolls were levied on the common inhabitants for carrying goods from one place to another place. No taxes were levied on those who were doing manual labor for their livelihood. Just like today the informal sector is not taxed, Manu also focused on non-taxation on manual laborers. But that does not mean they do not contribute to the state exchequer. There was a separate system in place. For it was explicitly stated that mechanics, artists and Shudras who had to do manual work for their livelihood and were unable to pay tax, they were required to work for the king for 1 day in each month without receiving payment for it. So, though they were exempted from paying taxes, they had to contribute to the state through manual labor, and they were not under any obligation to be paid for that 1 day's work each month. Types of taxes according to Manu. He focused on 7 main types of taxes, which were land revenue, fees, fines, taxes for the use of water in a river plying of boats, taxes on animals, taxes on artisans and various other professions, as the last one, the sales tax. Let us now move on to another important text focusing on public finance, and that is Kautilya's Artha Shastra. The Artha Shastra focuses on Artha, which was the basis of the state. The term Artha implies that wealth is the basis of a state, and no state can function without a comprehensive earth system. But the term earth was subjected to multiple connotations according to Kautilya, all revolving around the issue of public finance. Earth implied the subsistence of mankind, that is wealth. Earth implied the earth which contains mankind, that is land. Earth implied the science which treats of the means of acquiring and maintaining the earth, that is politics, the science of polity. Thus, Arthashastra was a guide to increase, acquire, and expand wealth virtuously. Kautilya is the first thinker to provide a systematic and balanced analysis of a proper system of taxation to construct a philosophy exalting earth or wealth and the importance of it for the establishment of a strong, powerful state. He visualized an all-Indian monarchical power, and since wealth is needed for power, he is interested in wealth. He explicitly states that all enterprises and actions require economic means for their realization. Hence, it is essential for the king to have a full treasury. Otherwise, he would try to devour the resources of the people. Kautilya further explicitly states that the best treasury is one which has been virtuously acquired either by inheritance or through the endeavors of the monarch, rich in gold and silver, filled with abundance of big gems of various colors and gold coins, and capable of withstanding calamities of long duration. So the treasury should always be filled with gold and precious coins, and it should always be in a position to cater to natural calamities. Kautilya holds that wealth and wealth alone is important, and he very interestingly states that both charity and desire are dependent on wealth. Let us try to understand his exposition on Artha. Kautilya has famously portrayed the idea of a well-structured state through 7 elements, which is called the Saptang theory of the state. One of the 7 elements is Kosha. Kosha means treasury. He writes in depth about the measures to be taken for a successful kosha, how the kosha has to replenish every time, and how the kosha is important to create a very, very powerful state. Kosha refers to the wealth of the state, and a healthy state is dependent on a healthy kosha or healthy treasury. Emphasizing on the importance of kosha, Kautilya writes in the Arthashastra, from wealth or kosha comes the power of the government, danda. With the treasury and the army together, which he calls Kosha Danda, the earth is acquired with the treasury as the ornament. According to Kautilya, the treasury accumulated by righteousness and legitimate means should be retained by the king or should be accumulated by him in a similar manner. The treasury should always stand the vagaries of time. Treasury is an important element because without a full treasury, you cannot maintain the army and keep the people loyal. Revenue is considered to be the linchpin of administration. Kautilya, however, utilizes the metaphor of picking only ripe fruits to prevent uprising that can threaten the ruler. So he speaks about how a filled-in kosh can prevent internal rebellions or problems in the kingdom. Let us now move on to another text, the Mahabharata, which also focuses on public finance and financial administration. The Mahabharata focuses on the fact that a strong state can only be created through a strong economic system. So, you cannot have a strong state with a weak economic base. Hence, the Shanti Parva emphasized on a strong system of taxation. The Shanti Parva further states that the king should collect revenue from 1/6 of the income of the people by imposing suitable taxes and by instituting fines to defaulters. The king must be vigilant enough to protect the kosha, because if the kosha is insecure, the king and the kingdom will be doomed. It is the duty of the king to keep his treasury full. Taxes were considered the king's remuneration for protecting and furthering the interest of the people. Shanti Parva insists on making taxation liberal, simple, rational, tolerable, acceptable, innate, legitimate, just, and judicious. So this was the system of taxation that Mahabharata provided for. However, this was not all. So important was taxation that the text proposed the need for creating awareness among the general population as to why taxation is important for the state. The people should know why the king is collecting taxes, why the king is imposing different kinds of taxes on people. The Shanti Parva states that the king should make aware the people why we need to collect taxes. There is one quote which is very interesting. It states that, pointing out to them the necessity of repairing his forts and of meeting the expense of his establishment and other heads, striking them with the fear of foreign invasion, and pointing to them the necessity that exists for protecting them and enabling them to ensure the means of living in peace, the king should impose taxes upon the Vaishyas of his kingdom. So the king should make people aware what all he needs to do for the people, and that can only be done when people pay taxes on time. The promotion of earth was to be procured by encouraging trade, industry, agriculture, by developing national resources, by bringing fresh land under cultivation, by building dams and canals to make agriculture independent of rain. The king should never seize money from wicked people as punishment. The state was to promote karma by ensuring peace and order so that each individual would ensure his life undisturbed, and by offering encouragement of fine arts, music, dancing, painting, sculpture, architecture in order to promote aesthetic culture. What is to be noted here is that in order to promote aesthetic culture, fine arts, we also need funds and money, and that is what is very important as explicitly stated in the Shanti Parva. The state was thus expected to maintain peace and order and promote moral, material and aesthetic progress of the kingdom through a proper and a rational system of taxation. Let us now move on to the Buddhist literature and the emphasis on public finance. The Buddhist literature speaks of a part of the paddy as a share of the produce. The Agana Sutta of the Digha Nikaya focuses on what the king should get from the people in return for protection and promotion. The Agana Sutta states that paddy should be a part of the revenue that the people should provide. The state can further impose excise duty, liquor duty, duties on merchandise, taxes on vendors, and in different places we find different types of regular taxation being imposed. Exemption of taxation was also granted to individuals under certain circumstances. Thus we find that both ancient Indian as well as Buddhist texts focused on a very, very rational system of taxation. But one thing was common in all the texts that we studied: taxation was simple, clear, rational, legitimate, but never a burden on the public. Let us quickly summarize what we have studied today. The organization of the economy into a properly structured system based on a well thought out philosophy has been the hallmark of ancient Indian polity. Ancient texts focused on economic institutions, canons of taxation, extent and scope of public finance. Thus, we can clearly say that public finance was very popular, was a particular discipline and a specific way of life of the king and the state in ancient India. The revenue system was structured and organized in order to cater to the peace and prosperity as well as well-being of the subjects. Thank you.